and welcome everyone to Folk Cited, the second episode of our monthly book club, or really text club, which we'll get into tonight. So thank everyone for joining us. We are this month talking Folklore 101 by Dr. Jeana Jorgensen, who is with us tonight. And we are going to talk with her about the book. We're going to talk about all the things that are wonderful about the book and the whole process. And then later on tonight, we're going to get into a conversation about teaching and pedagogy and just vibe our way through it. So we are very excited to do our very first author interview with friend of the show and friend of ours, Dr. Jeana. Welcome, welcome, welcome. How are you tonight?
Doing pretty okay. How are you?
I am well. We are so excited to have you here. We were just talking before we started today. Jeana is our first duplicate guest. Some of you may remember she was our second ever guest on Folkwise Live. So you are all invited to go watch that interview on our YouTube channel. It's so great to have Jeana back. Last time Jeana was on the show, we were anticipating the publication of her first book. And now there is a whole book, and we're all super excited, and we've all read it, and we have all loved it. So we might just jump right into an interview. How about that? So we're going to start at the very top. You wrote the book. You wrote a book. Tell us a little bit about that process. You went for it's a series of blog posts that you've edited, some new material. Just where did that come from? Where did this idea come from?
Well, as I've been kind of swimming my way through pandemic academia, I've been reevaluating my relationship to various institutions. And I thought, well, I could publish a book with an institutional, like an academic university press, but that would take years and like 50 people would read it, and it would pay me in prestige for a job I don't have because I am not a tenure track professor. And I was like, maybe that's not how I want to spend my time. So I was talking to an author friend of mine and about branching out and writing more for the public and so on, beyond just blogging. And she said, go for the low hanging fruit. So thank you, author friend Jen Stevenson, because I thought, like, well, I have a bunch of blog posts and I can always write more stuff about folklore. I always have more to say. So let's do this. So, and this summer, I think July, I started compiling everything and framing framing the overall collection, adding some new material, thinking about what from my teaching I want to incorporate because I try to make my lesson plans very similarly accessible, friendly, chit chatty, and so on. And then I published it this fall.
It's so exciting, and also thank you to your author friend for having you do this. It's so great. Yeah, one of the things we were thinking about as we were reading it was kind of the precarity of publishing and publishing academia, and how all of us have dealt with different versions of imposter syndrome, and kind of overcoming that as we do public folklore stuff. Is that anything you have ever dealt with?
Yes, I have a lot of imposter syndrome. It is not fun. I usually want to get off the ride, but that's hard to do. So I just sort of leaned on friends and colleagues and had the occasional like tiny breakdown. But it was challenging. I learned a lot. I really have to shout out my fellow writers, not just in the folklore community, but more broadly. So I have friends writing all kinds of novels and self-publishing, and they were a really helpful resource in figuring out not just the nuts and bolts logistics of how do you self-publish, how do you manage all the little things, but in connecting me to people who would become my editor, my cover designer, and so on. So the imposter syndrome was terrible, but finding community was good.
Oh, that's really great. Yeah. The development of community. Something I hadn't really thought about, of those outside communities that you necessarily have to develop to survive. Oh, lovely. Another thing that a lot of us were encountering as we were reading your book is a very humanized experience in the text, um, because we knew everyone personally. We would read, you would quote someone or reference someone, and we've hung out with them. The Folkwise team we've talked to these people, we've had drinks with them, and that is just a weird situation and a weird sensation as you read of like, oh, I know them. I know this person. I know the person who wrote this whole book, and I know the people she's referencing in the book. So it brought us to a place of, do you think we're at a generational shifting point in writing academia and writing text? Because it felt like we suddenly knew everyone. And is that, are we at a change point that's really important in teaching folklore?
That's an interesting question. I definitely feel like there's a core folklore crew that hangs out at conferences and so on and is connected online. And so the fact that we are moving into the space of, I guess, adults, like we're the adults now in a discipline. Somehow that happened. Somebody let us become adults. Um, so there are still a lot of more established scholars, of course, doing wonderful work and contributing and so on. But yeah, I think we're starting to occupy a space where a lot of us have been doing this long enough where it's like you're kind of looking around, you're like, okay, we're kind of in charge of setting the tone for a lot of things right now. More of us are peer reviewing for journals, editing special volumes, things like that. So maybe there is a bit of a shift because, a lot of us are some flavor of alt ac or public or applied folklore, not quite as intertwined with institutions, which is, again, an interesting shift. And I hope that it continues to sort of move us towards accessibility and publishing things more like open access and so on. I think that would be a pretty cool shift.
Yeah. Yeah, we were trying to figure out, and maybe you can answer for us. What was the last version of Folklore 101? We were thinking, like, well, there's Living Folklore and Lynn McNeil's book. So really, what's the last time we all did this as a discipline?
I mean, towards new perspectives in folkloristics, like,
Maybe? It's yeah, we were thinking about that. And then you brought up some of this, which seems to us like we're heading towards a place of women are writing the introductory texts. And what is that doing to that being the introduction?
yeah. So I find the gendered study of genres really interesting because I think a lot of folklore genres themselves pick up gendered connotations. Like in America right now, fairy tales are highly feminized, like, thanks Disney for that and a million other things.
Mhm.
Um, so you'll find like, folk narrative, I think foodways and so on. So it's really interesting to kind of know like who's drawn to which things. And of course, I'm really interested in feminist theory and the ways in which we see our experiences either replicated or maybe avoided in discourse and how we're either drawn to or maybe repelled by those kinds of things. So, um, yeah, I hope that we see more people maybe that were formerly a bit more marginalized writing the intro text, doing the outreach and stuff like that.
Great. Um, we had a lot of questions from our group on the self-publishing process. If you wanted to give us an overview of what that was like, and then at some point it got phrased for us as how to book without traditional structures.
Yeah, so I can definitely speak to that. So within self-publishing, there's kind of two main ways of doing it. There's KU, the Kindle universe, and there's going wide, which is everybody else. And if you have your stuff exclusively in KU, you can't go wide. And if you go wide, you can also have your stuff in Kindle, but not solely in Kindle. Like there's a whole thing. So a lot of it is kind of knowing where you want your audiences to be, who you're marketing to, and so on. So I decided to go wide, and luckily for me, once I was at the stage where I'd hired an editor and hired a cover designer, I was recommended a website called Draft 2 Digital, like the numeral 2, and that lets you upload your manuscript and then check boxes. Send this to Kobo, send this to Apple Books, send this to Google, and so on. So there are a lot of ways, especially if you're thinking just an ebook, to make it really easy to distribute. There's also a lot of like, now fill out your tax paperwork because that's not stressful at all. Like if I enter the wrong number, the IRS is coming for me, kind of a thing. So yeah, so there are lots of websites that will just make it go once you have a manuscript. Formatting it can be a bit of a pain. I hired my cover designer to do that. He was great about it. But there are, again, versions of software that will let you do it for free or cheap, or maybe you have to throw some money at it and then make it work. So yeah, I also learned just like the tiniest bit about marketing and audiences. Like I knew I wanted this to be a book for everybody, adult nonfiction. Um, and so a lot of my colleagues who are novelists, they're all like running like targeted Facebook ads and things like that. And you got to get your newsletter and all this stuff. So I didn't do quite as much with that, but I did try to write compelling copy and get some recommendations that I could print in it or put on the website. So it has also been interesting kind of like thinking about it from that level and knowing that I could be doing more advertising if I wanted to, but I don't know if I quite am ready to take that step because that's a whole separate skill set.
Yeah, it is a lot, and this is also a good time to remind everyone that after you read the book, to please review it on Goodreads and everywhere else that you have purchased the book, so that Jeana has good reviews and can use that copy. We have all been thrilled with the review that we got from Jeff of the Fairy Tellers, which I think you have seen now. Just it is the best folklore book I've read because it's the only one I ever finished. It's it's good. It's good to have that community development and know how well appreciated your book is. Um, okay, so the editor is really interesting to me because we kind of wondered about how the editorial process worked. How did you find an editor? In what universe does your editor live in?
Yeah, so this was again just my writer friends were like, "Hey, I work with Donna Martz. She's great." And I was like, "Cool, let me talk to her." So we sent some emails, established that we had some good common ground, talked about prices up front, all that stuff, expectations. And so it's interesting because when you publish in academic journals or an academic book, again, like just any kind of traditional publishing, the press takes care of all of that, like all of it. So I've had my work very extensively edited for some journal articles and book chapters and so on. Um, they take care of the cover design, they take care of the formatting and also the marketing and getting the thing on shelves. Um, but part of why I decided to self-publish was that, from what I understand, not only does traditional publishing take a long time and I have no chill,
Mm.
um, but also they have a lot more creative control. And I've also heard that a lot of the times they're like, okay, so what's your platform like? Well, what do you like on social media? How can you help market your own book? And I'm like, if I'm marketing my own book, I might as well just do the entire thing myself. If I'm marketing it myself anyway, and have control over it and be able to do what I want and fiddle around and see what works and see what doesn't. So, um, yeah, so with usually proofreading or copy editing is what you would hire someone for in the last stages, unless you want developmental editing to help you as you write the book, which that's also a skill that some people offer. It was interesting because I knew that the editor was not a folklorist, and so she wouldn't be fact checking me necessarily. But she caught more typos than I thought I had, so that is money well spent because again, with self-publishing, it's on you to present as professional a product as possible that will be appealing to readers and all that stuff. So, in my opinion, pretty much anybody can self-publish, but you have to shell out for an editor and a good cover because otherwise, like, why will people even give your work a second look?
Yeah, all good thoughts to be having. Yeah, so then the cover design, where mostly you directing that or ideas coming in collaboration with your designer?
Yeah, so it was a collaborative process. So I work with Remy Flagg, and his company is Cover Villain. He does a lot of like sci-fi and adventure type stuff as well. And yeah, so there it was collaborative. So he had me fill out a form with like thoughts and are there any parallels and so on. And this was another place where it was kind of weird being a folklorist in this space because one of the things you're supposed to do is market research. So go to the Amazon category for whatever your genre is or your subgenre, look at all the covers, and there are actually newsletters that will compile this in really popular genre fiction and send you the, I mean, you have to pay for it, but like send you the analysis and the breakdown. Like, these are the fonts and colors used in paranormal romance subgenre shifter thing. So that's a whole thing. So I was looking at all the books in Amazon's folklore and mythology category, and I mean, for one thing, apart from, some of the recent works we discussed, like Lynn McNeil's Folklore Rules, there's really nothing like what I was proposing to do. So I was like, so you get books, because again, folklore in the public mind is such a catch-all broad category that it'd be like, here's some like Norse mythology, okay. Here's some fairies doing things. Here's some runes. Here's some standing stones, sacred sculptures. I'm like, okay, okay. So I knew that like I didn't really want a pictorial representative cover because like what would be on it? This is an intro. This is a lot of things. Like there's no one thing that really encapsulates it. So luckily working with Remy, he is also an academic and he has spent time in lots of areas of publishing, and he related a personal narrative where he worked in a university bookstore for a while, and he would just sit there and, as someone who's also an artist, look at the covers of academic books and think, these are boring as crap. Who's going to buy these books based on the cover? So when I came to him with my idea, he was like, I don't think I've designed academic nonfiction for the public before, but I'm in. I'm in to make this interesting and appealing looking. So that was kind of our process, was like looking at what's out there, talking about my book, back and forth a little bit. So yeah, I'm really happy with how the cover ended up.
So I have two follow-ups for that. One is the butterfly from you or from Remy?
He read a couple chapters of my book, and I'd mentioned that fairy tales is kind of my specialty. So we came up with the sort of the fairy wings overlaid with the Wi-Fi transmission symbol, and then there's a keyhole in the middle. Yeah. Um, and so it just kind of all came together, and so like the wings could represent either like fairy wings, fairy tales, or legends, or the wings could represent transformation, which I think is a very like cool underlying folklore theme, because folklore is such a shapeshifter at the end of the day. Like it can jump forms and genres, and you have the same content like in a conspiracy theory versus a rumor versus a legend or something else entirely. So yeah, that just kind of came out of his brain, and I'm just like, all right, cool.
It is very cool and is one of the most striking things when I first saw the cover and you posted it. Like, that's a thing. This is a very cool symbol and I'm very obsessed with it. And I need to know more everything. So that's great. Oh, there's so much in that now. The second one is, should we be putting together a motif index of the symbols of self-published covers? Because it sure sounds like we should.
It's it's a whole thing. Yeah, I cannot claim to understand it fully, but there are many motifs out there of like the protagonist, it's often a woman, especially paranormal romance, urban fantasy, and so on. Like a woman standing with either her front or her back to the viewer, like leather figures prominently. Oftentimes there's like an animal, like she has a familiar, or her like partner is a shapeshifter. Like, there's a lot. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, I saw a meme today that was like Picasso says the best way to show that someone is a werewolf is that they have ripped cut off jeans. Like as long as they're wearing shredded jorts, you know it's a werewolf. I'm like, let's do that. That's gonna be the next AFS game. We're all gonna get together and do the motifs of weird covers. Let's do it. It'll be fun. Okay, great. So yeah, then so with the self-publishing process, and all of this new community that you've developed and everything about it. Do you think that this process, did you feel that this process gave you some more freedom in terms of the content and really the creativity around it? And really, did something get through that might not have gotten through if you had gone with a more traditional process?
Yeah. Well, first, I knew that because a chunk of the book is available online already, if you want to hunt down a bunch of separate blog posts, I knew that a traditional press would be less interested in the project. So part of me was like, I'm just going to bypass all the rejections and go straight to doing my own thing. Um, so I don't think there's anything really extreme in my book. I don't think there's, I mean, I think I drop a couple four-letter words here and there. I think I like mention, because I also study sexuality, I like mention some random stuff along those lines. Like queer people exist. I don't know. Like I don't feel like there's anything too out there in my book. Um, yeah, I feel like if I were to have gone about this a different way, I would have put it together as an open access textbook, which I know that there are grants through my university to do, and I've always thought that would be cool. And then the thought flees. So that's probably the route that I would have gone with this particular idea for a project.
Is that something you might pursue in the future, going for an open access textbook, or are you completely on this self-publishing game now?
I'm very into the self-publishing game now. In part, like so part of my continual struggle with academic publishing is how much free labor we have to put into it to make it go, and I'm just kind of over it. So I understand there are sometimes good reasons to do so. Like goodness knows, like I still write for free plenty. Especially when I think it's a good cause or it's going to be a really good journal article collection or whatever. Um, so I think that I'm enjoying self-publishing. Just the possibility of making a little money, like as an academic, is very appealing. Um, and I think that if I had an idea that I thought like students will definitely benefit from this, I will do this thing, then yeah, I would do an open access textbook. But I feel like Folklore 101 is the textbook that I would write, and I wrote it. So I'm like, well, what's the next idea? Maybe like a gender studies thing? I don't know. So I'm open to the idea. But I also feel like I've had a pretty hefty dose of I'm doing my own thing, I work for myself, no one tells me what to do. I feel like going back to working and playing nice with others might be a little challenging.
Solid. Yeah, but working for yourself is always fun. So yeah, and you just started blogging with Only Sky, yes?
Correct.
That's since last week?
We launched, yeah, just like a week or two ago.
And so what's it that's more
So just like a mix of like current events and folklore stuff and gender stuff and who knows what else.
great. So then are we going to see a self-published poetry collection from you in the future?
Ah, mm, I don't know about that one. We'll see.
We'll see. um, oh, Daisy says their computer just died.
Oh,
Happened. Okay. Well, at this good time, are there questions from the chat, Daisy?
Here, I'll let the people hear me. As far as I can tell, there aren't specific questions from the chat, but if you have any, please feel free to put them in the chat. People are talking about who is writing the Jorts Pants werewolf paper. That's a question for you. Also, this stream is haunted. Those are the other things that people are saying. So,
yeah, stream has been haunted lately.
it has.
This is why you can't play your ghost games.
I know. I'm not allowed to play ghost games on my computer because my computer's been haunted by them, apparently. Anyway, continue.
Okay. Okay, great. So the next one, as we have mentioned, we know everybody in the book, which is weird. And so we kind of wonder, are there Easter eggs in the book we should be looking for?
I don't think I thought that far ahead. I think I was just utterly consumed with learning or figuring out what the hell I was doing with self-publishing. Yeah, that and actually formatting footnotes proved to be tricky, which is why I have endnotes instead of footnotes. That was a whole thing. That was very stressful. So normally I would take some like little like snarky aside and put it in a footnote. So that didn't really have the chance to happen here.
I just have to say I really liked the endnotes formatting. I don't know, it was the first time I'd seen it in kind of really, yeah, in the kind of accessible text. And it didn't feel burdensome.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, it just, I don't know, it was one of the first times I'm like, oh, this is really helpful. Oh, good, these are all the references I need. Thanks, Jeana. So I really liked the formatting of it. That's your note. That's my note. I like the formatting.
I'll take it. Thank you.
It worked really well for me. I enjoyed it very much. That's what I got. It seemed great. So what was your favorite section to work on?
Hang on. I have to get this right. Okay. I got it right. Okay, so when I was deciding, because I basically had a bunch of like, here's a lot of tiny standalone pieces. How do I organize them? Okay, let's try this. So when I introduced the section on different genres, I introduced the four-part rubric, which is something that I use to teach. So every folklore item or genre has content, context, form, and function. And form breaks down roughly to style and structure. And I think by now my students hate it because I really in my first year seminar especially, like we're on the four-part rubric. It's a whole thing. But I just think it's so useful because I think that people will often look at folklore and they'll get just really obsessed with one of those things and forget about the rest. So like fairy tales, there's like dragons in them and stepmothers. And so yeah, and then people will just forget that like you can swap out motifs. Like, from a fairy tale structuralist perspective, they often have the same underlying plot structure. The motifs come and go. They're very much related to like what's going on in your like country and your religion and all these other factors of identity. So I really think you need all the parts of the four-part rubric to make sense of all these things. And that's why I'm like kind of obsessed with it, even though like it's not perfect, obviously. Context informs content and all that stuff, but I just really like it.
We're allowed to have our favorites. And then different from favorite, what do you think is the most interesting section for people to read?
Ooh. Um. Hmm. Hmm. I think probably the tradition and variation section, because again, that's one of the newer parts that I worked really hard on. So I think that one probably has a lot of like interesting, useful things.
Um, I have some special request questions. Um, Dom in particular would like to know more about your awkward teen years reading Piers Anthony. And I second that question. Because who didn't have an awkward teen years reading Piers Anthony?
Yeah, so my arrival to science fiction and fantasy, of which I've been a lifelong reader and occasionally writer, is weird and convoluted. So as a kid, I was all in for fairy tales. Like we had this really thick, like folk tales around the world book, and that's when I first read The White Cat by Madame Danois, which I do not think portrays healthy relationships. And kid me probably should not have read it. I can summarize the tale if anyone doesn't know what I'm talking about. So I was happily reading fairy tales that kind of took a step into fantasy as well, like the Brian Jacques Redwall books. Those were lovely. And then in like fourth or fifth grade, we had to do a book report every month, and I was like knocking it out of the park for the most part. And then we got to science fiction, and this would have been in the late 1980s, early 1990s, thereabouts. And science fiction at that time for kids was My Teacher is an Alien.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hated, I hated that shit. I felt condescended to. Like seriously, I could not.
Ah.
I could not. And so I still had to do the stupid book report though, so my mom marched me into like, I don't know, like B. Dalton or one of those like Crown books, like one of those
Oh
pre
my
Barnes and Noble or
Brown.
and so she managed to find somebody, and like I thought it was someone who worked there, but I think my mom just like grabbed some random woman. And I was like, my daughter is a very advanced reader, and she has to do a book report on science fiction. Can you recommend something? And so this lady, whoever she was, recommended the Dragon Riders of Pern series by Anne McCaffrey. And so I read Dragonflight, just like fell into it, loved it. And so from Anne McCaffrey, I went to Mercedes Lackey, Piers Anthony, and other authors like that, and just like dove in head first. And so with Piers Anthony, I think my little snarky comment in that the big categories of folklore introduction section, that was referring to the incarnations of immortality. But I also read all of his Xanth books, despite how bizarrely misogynist they all are. And then
Yeah.
there's one about space that there were like these parallel universes in like one sci-fi space setting and one fantasy magic setting, and people could like swap out for their doubles. And then there was this one trilogy like Omnivore Ox and Orn that was about sentient fungi. And then like crazy shit.
I loved all of those books too. Like I also had the Anne McCaffrey phase and the Mercedes Lackey phase, and like it was such a good time of my life. And then yeah, also like you encounter the Piers Anthony, and then it takes you a while to be like, is this okay? Also, completely thought that Crown Books was only regional to me growing up, so this is very exciting that somebody else knows Crown. I genuinely thought that was only where I was growing up and that it was a small family-owned business, but now I'm very excited that you also have a Crown experience. Oh, yay. Another question we had from the group was to ask for an elaboration on dumb blonde jokes as a commentary on modern gender roles.
Yeah, I think this is just straight up Alan Dundas interpretation. So, based on the data in the Berkeley Folklore Archives, you started seeing dumb blonde jokes 60s, 70s, and so on, which kind of tracks with like second wave feminism. So the dumb blonde jokes are, I think, a way to sort of say women are in spaces where they shouldn't be, and they're just too stupid to be here. And so it's one of those things where humor provides sort of a cover, like it provides a distancing tactic. Very, oh, it's just a joke. Oh, it's just about blondes. You're not blonde. Ha ha ha. Why are you offended? The one piece of counter evidence to this is that there are some dumb blonde men jokes. So the classic example of that one is, how did you know? Or I don't want to mess this one up. I love studying jokes, but I'm not actually that good at telling them. So hang on, give me like 1 second. Okay. Why did the blonde have bruises around her belly button?
Why?
Because her boyfriend was also blonde. So there are some of those, but the majority are dumb blonde women.
Oh my god, that's incredible. Okay. Oh, are the himbos the new dumb blonde jokes?
I don't
Are
know. I
is the golden retriever boyfriend a variation of the dumb blonde joke?
Maybe. I mean, I'm trying to think like the classic himbo that comes to my mind for recent stuff, at least, is in the new, but not the new Ghostbusters movie, where there's was it Chris
Chris
Evans?
Hemsworth.
It's Hemsworth. Oh, I mixed up the Chris's.
Well,
Um,
no, but Chris Evans is also a himbo.
so they track Pretty Blonde.
They do track blonde, and I know I've read them as it's the himbo, it's the golden retriever boyfriend. Is this are we seeing the gender shift in the dumb blonde joke?
I don't know. I feel like we need more data.
This is going to lead into the other question that was given to me. Where is the dumb blonde joke article?
Somebody give me funding to go to Berkeley and work in the folklore archives, and yeah, we're on it.
We're manifesting this, everybody. We are going to manifest the dumb blonde article. We're going to have himbo research done. It's going to be incredible. Yeah, great. Okay. I also had a request that you recite the slit a sheet rhyme for all of us.
I feel like you can't just spring that on someone.
We can do my personal favorite, the variation on that of the say this until you swear is I am a pleasant pheasant plucker. I pluck pleasant pheasants. And there's like three other parts of it, and then I can't remember them, but it was always the fun warm up for performance was the I am a
Oh.
pleasant pheasant plucker. Oh, it's a good one.
Yeah, no, I enjoy catches, catchphrases, jokes, and things like that just as much as the next person. But I fear I am more of a passive bearer of that genre of folklore.
Very important. Would you like to give us a quick definition on passive and active bearers? It feels very important for this.
Yes. An active bearer of folklore, usually a certain genre or body of text, is someone who can do the thing competently. So they can tell all the jokes in the repertoire. They can maybe they're the preparer of their family's foodways and their traditional recipes. Maybe they are actively a performer in this genre of folk music, folk dance, and so on. Basically, they can do the thing and they can do it well. Someone who is more of a passive bearer of folklore, usually again certain genre, certain body of texts, they know the thing, they recognize the thing. Can they do the thing? It may depend. So again, that's kind of me with jokes. I'm more of a passive bearer of jokes. Like I recognize I've heard a lot of them. Am I really good at telling jokes? Nah. And the interesting thing, of course, is that people could be, maybe like an active bearer of one genre, a passive bearer of another. So
And then something that I really resonated with me because when we conceived of Folk Cited as a show, it was our code word is book club. I think we were going to have a book club. But very fast, I did not want it to be a book club. I wanted it to be a text club. So a little bit of the definition you use for text, just broadly speaking, what is a text for everyone to know?
a text is any self-contained item or instance in the world of folklore, really, of anything. I mean, I think especially in the classroom, a lot of students come to class thinking a text is a poem, a play, or a novel. It must be a work of literature with a capital L. That is a text. And really, again, I think a text is any kind of self-contained or even sometimes a fragment, a type of thing, an example of a thing. Like here's a text of I just told you a joke. That was a joke text. There are proverb texts. If you prepare a whole Thanksgiving meal, that's your meal text. Maybe individual recipes are texts. If we're studying material culture, maybe the item itself, like the piece of pottery, is a text. And so I think that it really helps to, again, kind of shift away from literature, as much as I like literature, to say there are lots of kinds of things that exist in the world that we can usefully study and engage with.
And then, what is your favorite text to teach then?
Oh, I have a lot of favorites.
What is
Uh,
your favorite? What's your favorite written one? Let's start there.
I have it right here. It's Marion Watley and Alyssa Hankins' Did You Hear About the Girl Who? Which is it's so good. I'm teaching it right now.
Oh,
Yeah, so it's co-authored by a folklorist and a health educator, and it's very much about all the ways in which we get both formal and informal sex education through folklore. So jokes, personal narratives, a lot of contemporary legend. That's the main focus of the book. Just so many things. Folk beliefs around menstruation and pregnancy. So this is definitely one of my favorite books to teach. I'm just so happy that it exists.
and then your favorite not written text.
Um, I think there are a number of really good like folk narratives in my family. So family narratives, some personal narratives, and I haven't really studied them yet. I'm hoping to work with my mom and write a memoir of her life because she's had a really interesting life. So there's a lot of like really like funny stories and things like, oh, that's why we are the way we are. Okay. So I really like those. And of course, I really love food. But at one point, I swore to myself that because I was so good at turning all of my hobbies and passions into academic areas of study and side gigs, I had to stop somewhere. So I'm like, food, I will never study food. I love it to death. I'm constantly cooking, baking. I'm on like recipe websites. I'm checking out new restaurants. Like I'm looking at their menus online before deciding like if I want to get takeout. Like I'm pretty food obsessed, but I make a point of not studying food as a scholar.
It's good. Boundaries are important. Boundaries are super important for everyone. All right, that is the meat of this. Was there anything else about your book you feel like we should know about that you were particularly proud about of it? Anything at all?
I'm just really happy that other folklorists want to engage with it because again, I had such an idea that this is for the general public, people who were like, "Oh yeah, I always wish I took a folklore class in college, but I never got around to it," or fellow writers who want to use folklore in their world building. I have all these audiences in mind who are very much more like normal people, you know, not the folklorists. Well, we're kind of weird, but so I'm just really happy that folklorists are engaging with it, and like, yeah, you know most of the stuff in here. Like, obviously, there might be one or two surprises from outside of whatever your main area of study is, but I'm just really thrilled that everyone's kind of picking it up, giving it a chance, talking about it. You know, maybe considering teaching with it or whatever. Because again, it's kind of like me being like, here's a bunch of stuff. Hopefully, it's useful and interesting.
It is. It is all useful and interesting. I kept turning pages and being like, oh, okay. I hadn't thought about it like that. Good. Okay. Oh, that's right. That's a thing. And that was really lovely. And also, like I said, that very weird humanized experience of, oh, we're the adults now? Oh no. Oh no. Okay. Well, lovely. So, Daisy, checking in, does chat have any questions or comments that they need to share?
Not in particular, other than people are popping off about Redwall in relation to some of the earlier text you were talking about, and people do really want to know what both of your animal in Redwall would be.
Hedgehog, we're done.
So I really need to go back and reread those books because it's been so long. But I think the first Redwall book I read was Mariel of Redwall, and she was a
Oh,
mouse.
yes.
She had the knotted rope thing, and they were
Mhm.
pirates.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I feel like I'm a baby duck, and that just I
Oh my
imprinted on
god!
There need to be ducks in Redwall, though.
my.
That's so cute.
Oh, yeah. My dad read me all the Redwalls, or at least the first 15 or so, because Brian was still publishing at the time. And he did all the voices, and I haven't been able to reread them because he did all the voices. And you have to understand, like, there is no reason for my parents to have produced 3 theater kids, but my dad would do all the voices, so he would do, like, the whole Welsh minor voice for the moles. and all of the rabbits had this like RAF pilot voice, like fully out of 1950s films, like very much David Niven Biggles voices for the rabbits, and I just cannot read the books now because I'm like, it doesn't sound right in my head.
That's precious.
And I wonder what's happening to like my nieces who are encountering these books, and like, oh, are you having the same experiences I'm having? Because there is a generational shift, and your dad is probably not doing the voices that our dad did. Even if he can do them, I don't know. I should check.
I got another question from Death Lorist. What about Enchanted Forest Chronicles? I want to hear Jeana's take.
I love those. So those were in my like pre-encountering science fiction usefully phase. So I was all about those. I don't remember much about them now, but I loved them to pieces at the time. There was also this book that I read, I think in second grade, called The Ordinary Princess.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like this princess, and she's like the seventh child or whatever, which actually is a highly significant number in Portuguese and Spanish before. And this like crotchety old like sea witch fairy figure comes, and like she's all like drying out, and she's like feeling kind of gross that day because she has to be on dry land for this princess's christening or whatever. And so she looks at this princess and says, "You shall be ordinary." So even though all of her sisters have blonde hair and blue eyes and like perfect little noses, this princess has brown hair and brown eyes and freckles and a little snub nose or whatever. And so she like at some point runs away to have an adventure, and she meets this guy who's also ordinary, and like of course it ends up being a prince, so they actually can get married. But it was just like really, really charming.
Quilts have had meaning on many levels. Making quilts helped me to get a sense of my own space, sense of finding my way, sense of really working my way out of the labyrinth.